Welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, the podcast show number 265, with your host, Lauren Gray.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hospitality Marketing, the podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Gray, and this is episode number 265. So each week we spend around 20 to 30 minutes sharing the most interesting tools, news, and techniques being used in marketing for the hospitality industry. We also do a quick recap of our weekly live video show, This Week in Hospitality Marketing, which also airs every Friday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern U.S. time. So with that, let's get started.
And now, today's new resource tool.
So our tools for review this week are a little on the self-inspiration side, and you'll see why as we get into the technique of the week, and that is security tools, password tools. We're at a time of year where we reflect upon what we've done historically, and of course we've had the tragedy of our year this year industry-wide for COVID for 2020, and it has thrown us into a whole disarray as to how we've handled things and what we do for things. But it also has presented some unique issues and problems, one of which is the voids that it has created within our team system and the holes that it presents within our security systems. And for that reason, I'd like to talk about three tools that I'm familiar with firsthand and work with on a regular basis. And I'll talk to you why I'm bringing this up in today's conversation. The first, and I use this for my own personal security, and that is 1password.com, the numeric 1, password.com. I use this between myself and my family to go over and coordinate all of our passwords. We found ourselves repetitively using similar passwords, so each of us could log into different accounts that each of us had. It was one of a handful of passwords that we would pick from. Unfortunately, that creates a huge security issue. You can look at any Pinterest platform as to the time it takes for a hacker to cut through word only or word with one number or word with four numbers. It's almost instantaneous how fast they can find a password based on your old addresses, your old passwords they bought off of the dark web, things that you use over and over. So we had worked into a system where a lot of our familiar or regularly used platforms had similar passwords. And then for all the ones that we just touch once in a while or what have you, we would use some password code encryptor, like some jibbly-jish kind of thing. Problem was, and we kept that on the list. Problem was, of course, if anybody got to the list, they would have access to all those things as well. But also all of our really important passwords like phone number, phone systems, and email accounts and so forth were all very, very similar. And that creates a huge issue should you get hacked, because then literally those control systems of your email and your phone, your cell phone and so forth, which is used for authentication and so forth, get out of your hands. And that's very, 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 very dangerous. So we decided to instead change and use 1Password for everything. We keep a relatively robust 1Password password for our password account that we do try to frequently change. And from that, we go over and then allow for the 1Password to generate passwords using multiple letters, basically 10 units or 10 characters with a combination of capitals, lower cases, numerics, and symbols. And that will make it that most systems take up to 5 years to be able to crack that kind of password. So happy for us in that sense. So that's what we use for our own personal accounts. There is a business version of this, which is why I'm bringing it to everyone's attention. You can create a business version of 1Password. It's a very robust system, very good, very user-friendly. However, it's also, it takes some money. I think it's around $50 for the account, and then you pay per user on it. So if you have numbers of people on it, it can get relatively pricey pretty quick when it comes to that. The second tool is RoboForm. That I use for business. I was able to fortunately buy one from AppSumo, lifetime one, which allowed me to create a corporate account for it. That's very, very, very useful. I use that as a selling point actually with my clients, that whenever we get accesses to the platforms that we need for their company, we put this into RoboForm with the caveat being that only certain people on our team will have access or be given access because of their need to get to those accounts, and all of their username and passwords would just nothing but be a series of dots, so they would never actually truly see the username or password within that account. They would only be able to go to one RoboForm and look for the account that they need access to, click on it, and then it would autofill and go to the website or access portal that it would needed to go to, and they would never actually see that stuff. And once they no longer needed to be having access to that account, we simply take off that authority from them, and they would never have been able to see it, be able to take it, be able to copy it, and of course then be restricted in access for it. So Roboform is very, very good with that. And similar in line with that, and it's a very well used platform also, is LastPass.com. This one also is great for corporate. It has a lot of value proposition for the same reasons. You can create multiple users, limit their visibility as to what they actually see, and accessibility. You don't have to worry about keying in a variety of users and then having to extract them from the platforms. Very useful tool as well. So those are our 3 tools this week: 1password.com, Roboform.com, and LastPass.com. And that brings us up to our technique of the week.
Now, for this week's hospitality technique.
So our technique is securing yourself and your organization against hacks. And I bring this up because, well, recently we got hacked. At least our Facebook Business Manager account got hacked, and I'll explain a little bit of the details of that. But one of the things that we've learned from this process, as much as we secured ourselves, there are still leaks that we can't control, things that are connected to us via other accounts that we don't control, that influence our accounts, and through our account access, in turn can be damaging to our clients. Case in point, with even double authentication required to log into our Business Manager accounts. We try, and I would highly recommend that you do double authentication on everything. As annoying as it is, or as inconvenient as it is critically important that you create as many thresholds that are allowed to you to increase your security for accessibility. Now, one of the loopholes that we found from this process of getting hacked through our Facebook Business Manager was the fact that an old employee address that was never closed down by a client that did have access to their Business Manager account, which in turn was connected to another Business Manager account, strangely enough, through another employee's email address that was connected to our client's Business Manager account, which was connected to ours. Very robust. I mean, from the hacking perspective, is like, good golly. They were simply going for the AdWords accounts, or to say AdWords accounts, but Facebook ad accounts, which had credit cards on them. Now, nicely, Facebook, of course, as well as all other companies, don't keep track of credit cards, so it's not as if they hijacked the credit card. They did hijack the usability of that credit card in the ad set campaign for that client. We noticed a Chinese ad built on one of our client accounts that should not have been built on our social account, and we're like, my team member was flagged that an ad set was made, and of course that raised suspicion with him, and I got notified that our backup credit card to our client was charged. And so we go in and we saw this ad set and we're like, well, that's not ours. We went to turn it off. As soon as we turned it off, that triggered to whoever this hack was that we had found them. Well, unbeknownst to us, because we didn't look further, they had already made themselves admins to our Business Manager account via email, which supersedes the secondary second authentication process, two-step authentication process. And as soon as they saw that we were in there, they took us out as admins of finance. We couldn't control the finance, which means we no longer control the credit cards or the accounts on those credit cards, which was dangerous because then they just blew up, putting a lot of Chinese ads, which I'm sure was sent to business to generate revenues on traffic or revenues on affiliates or whatever was the monetization model of that was, at the expense of our credit cards that were on file for our ad accounts. Fortunately, we had good connections with Facebook. Fortunately, Facebook was very responsive. Fortunately, if you have that issue, go right directly to the Facebook chat for business support or AdWords support or ad support, and they're very cooperative. It took about 48 hours for them to shut down the accounts. They immediately paused everything, shut everything off. The detriment was that it turned off all of our campaigns and our accessibility to control any campaigns for our clients for that duration of time, which meant lower productivity for us, plus the dreaded calls to clients to say, please know that this is going on. So that was painful to say that was happening. Fortunately, our clients have such great respect for us. The first thing they responded to was, hey, if it can happen to you, it can happen to us, which was very thoughtful in that sense. Everything was refunded back and credited back, and everything was good, and we rebalanced everything out, and we eventually got back into control of all of our AdWords accounts for Facebook and so forth. But the loss of productivity is the painful aspect. The fact that we were down for so many days to go over and get that processed and taken care of by Facebook. They wiped out our Business Manager account, and so that some rules, when a new admin replaces or shuts off another admin, it takes about 7 days before that turns permanent, in the hopes that that you don't find out that they did that to you and they've literally hijacked your business manager account, and now you have no accessibility and no reference to Facebook to be able to do this, and it creates tremendous danger for that. So it's always good to monitor and set up notifications on your Facebook Business Manager account of any changes that are going on in your accounts, so these things can get discovered early and fast. One thing we learned from now on, should we ever see that there's something abnormal about anything that's going on in any of our ad accounts for any reason, the first thing we do is, if we can still have access to our method of payment, go in and rip it out. Take it off. You can always put it back in later. Apologize to the client that you have to put it back in, whatever, or you yourself have to put your own account back in. But it's better to rip out the reason that they're there, because even if they do take you off administrative and everything else to it, at least they can't damage the method of payment or exploit the method of payment for that. Now, they didn't touch any of the pages that the business manager had account to. They weren't out to hijack pages of businesses or so forth. They were simply there to exploit the credit cards that were on file for ad campaigns. So we learned a lot from that. So my recommendation to all those that are listening, first go in and audit, as anyone should, the accessibilities or current accessibilities to your systems. I would first go into anybody that was previous employees or anybody that had email accounts with you and purge or redirect all of those accounts to a catch-all. Catch-all email is literally anything that somebody puts before the @yourwebsitedomain.com. And make sure that that goes in there so that there's no verification, authentications, or usabilities of that. I would then next step go in and see accesses to any platform, such as Business Manager, such as ad accounts, such as any of those things that require payments on it, and to see who genuinely has access to that. Now, that might be one step back as to who has access to the master email account. Now, let me explain that. Now, when we set up our accounts, not to have a client give 5 or 10 accesses to each of their accounts because I want each of my team members to have access to it, we provide a universal email address that's used for our clients. And we ask that that email address be added to their access list when it comes time for accessibility to their platforms. And from that one email address, my team members have the ability to go in and log in as that one email address, and then from there go use the password to go in and add and log into whatever they need to log into. We control who has access. We change the password to that email address all the time, especially after anytime we remove somebody or add somebody. Really actually remove them. Adding them, we don't really change it right after they add on, but we try to change it on a persistent basis so that that way we don't run into the rut of also being discovered with a password that's usable. But we use the encryption one for that, and that is also hidden from our users, so they don't actually see the password for Omni. They just know that it's there when they go into our robo form and click onto it to access that email account to go move forward. So there's that. I would also recommend that two-factor authentication always with everything for it. I would also say that we're going through all the paid platforms as to who has accessibility to shut off anybody that's not currently there. And I would also go over and say, as a regime, anybody that does have current access, force the 30-day renewal of email of passwords. Remember, with this process, there's a bit of a pyramid to this. The higher up the pyramid, the higher the control factor of a hack. If they're simply accessing an account and get into that one account there, you can only damage that one account. But if they go higher up and they can actually control your email, then they can do password resets, verifications through your email. And if you're not watching your email that runs that, then you run into the trouble of somebody hacking you and you're not being aware of it until it's too late and they've taken you off that email and you can't control resetting passwords or verification processes. And the highest one above all of that is, if you do two-step authentication, is accessing your cell phone with the authenticator on it. Now, I haven't understood completely why. I mean, to a point I understand, but also I wish there was other ways around it. They only allow for two-factor authentication one unit, like your phone, to be the two-factor authentication source. And I understand that restricts the ability for people to steal an iPad or a laptop or whatever that might have it also on it. But if they get your control of your phone account and can get into your phone and literally change access that you can't verify that it's your phone, to fight the fact that all of a sudden you've lost control of your phone. And this happens with Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T all the time. That if the hack can break into your phone account and take over your phone account, and then in turn reassign the verification platform to whatever they want to, their phone perhaps, okay, another phone, turn the SIM card, change, literally take your phone away from you, okay, imagine how scary that would be. And from that, they can now go in and change your passwords, get into your email accounts. They've literally become you. And there's not no way, but it is almost near impossible to convince AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon that you are who you are compared to all the people, the person on the other end that's stolen your identity saying that they are. Because they have all your information now. Everything about you they can mimic. Everything about you that you say about yourself, they can go in and find out that exact same information saying, no, this person's not that I'm the real person. So you literally can lose your identity. So remember, the apex of this problem is truly your phone. So if you're ever going to change persistently a password on anything, it is your phone system. Persistently, consistently, change it. Require authentication. Require things that aren't in your phone that you need to verify that you are the phone owner. Don't put them in your phone. Now, the nice part about these tools I mentioned to you earlier, 1Password, RoboForm, and LastPass, is you can keep it so that unless the person hijacked your phone and that application is on your phone, if they don't have that password to get into it, they can't really dive in, okay, and steal so much more. So don't use the same password for your phone that you use for that, because that's an easy one for them to figure out, okay? Also, try not to use the same password for your emails that you use for a phone. That's an easy one to figure out. All of those things. And also, as a reminder, it's so convenient to save passwords into your browser. Well, as soon as they hijack your email address, they've hijacked your ability to all the passwords that are associated with the browser for that email address. So if you've added that all into your Chrome or Safari or whatever have you, and they get onto your phone, and those are in that phone, okay, then they now have those passwords as well. Even though you may have put them in 1Password and think you're safe, if you've duplicated them on your phone, on your computer or on your browsers, then they have the same accesses, and it really didn't help you. So very dangerous stuff in that sense, and they're out there. They're constantly out there. It's a constant barrage of attack for you. So highly recommend that while we go through this budgeting and also the transition of and looking at the fact that we've transitioned so many of our team members and unfortunately may have had to let a lot of them go and so forth, this is the time. And remember what vendors you still leave connected to your accounts. They may not be your current vendor, and you may not have any, but you may still have left them connected to this. I unfortunately keep reminding my previous clients that I'm not doing anything currently with, because I do things on a demand basis. Take me off your systems. I can always get put back on, but take me off of your systems so that you're limiting your exposure to anybody being able to break into your systems. And you'd be surprised how little of that is actually done. A persistent quarterly audit of your accessibility to all of your platforms is a mandatory requirement of all marketers, all IT people, security people. It's a fact of life now. So there you have it. Securing yourself and your organization against hacks. And now we get into
this week's hospitality news that you should know.
So we had a great live show as always. We had lots of hosts this week, which was really a pleasant surprise. We have lots of hosts every week, but we had actually 11 talking heads on the screen at one point, which is I didn't think that the platform could actually handle it, but it did. We had 10 co-hosts other than myself, which with us was a first-time talking head co-host, dear friend of mine from many years ago, many years actually, and that is Richard Farrar from Farrar Consulting. He was vice president of franchise owners for Marriott for many years. Stepped away from them 10 years ago, I think it was, or thereabouts. Very talented man. Great to have him on the show. Also with us was Adele Gutman, who just recently inspired her Reputation Management, which truly, for anybody that can put the top 4 New York hotels on the map in TripAdvisor and consistently keep them for many years in a row, knows her stuff. Ben Hanley from 3 and 6 across the pond over in Northern England. Stephanie Smith with Cogwheel Marketing. Tim Peter with Tim Peter & Associates. Dan Waxman with Sacido, based out of Hawaii. Tristan Haywood also with 3 and 6. Dean Schmidt with MetaSearch Marketing. And Basecamp Meta, who will both teach and do your MetaSearch requirements. Stuart Butler with Fuel Travel, and Mr. Edward St. Ange with Flip2. So we had a great diversity of co-hosts as always. We had a very nice, long, open discussion that Richard actually kicked off, which was the state of the industry and what it looks forward to when it gets beyond 50% occupancy. And what we say by that is because of what Tim brought to the table, that right now, even in mid-2022, it is not expected that at least 50% of the current travel market is still willing to travel regularly. Which means, technically speaking, that 50% of the demand is still not going to be there 2 years from now. So this is a long haul proposition for us. This is a long slog rebuild. And because of that, market share and occupancies, and as we talked about, and we all know from client communications, or you yourself know, you can't operate at a profitability of 50% occupancy. And I brought up the conversation that we have to maybe rethink what we consider to be accepted numbers. We maybe some can't drive profitability. Maybe sustainability is really the marker that we have to redefine for ourselves, and not worry about or not be able to degrade ourselves into thinking that because we're not being profitable, maybe sustainable is what we can do. Maybe we margin ourselves just to pass the ability of being able to pay all the bills that are coming along and keep ourselves in existence until that profitability can be returned through strategic growth. Not that that's the pleasant thought to this, but as we're in the budget season right now, that is a reality to this. If this is a long haul proposition in our environment of hospitality, then we have to decide how we sustain ourselves in that market. And keeping our old goals pre-COVID as to, we need 7% margin, 14% margin, 11% margin, whatever it is, just may not be realistic when we're running at 50% demand. So that's where we had that conversation. It was a great conversation. I highly recommend you listen to it. We also talked about what the brands are capable to do to help their properties and what they're not doing, what they should be doing. A lot of limitations as to what they are offering and a lot of opportunities of what they could be offering. I've been an outspoken critic of brand. It's apparent by how they're losing hotels, how they're losing trust, and how they're losing market share because of their ineffectiveness, furloughing 40% and up of their entire internal team and not providing service basics to the brands, but to the hotels, but the hotel staff are still required to pay the same billing and fees and percentages is, to me, convoluted, unfair, and upside down. And that's making a lot of owners and franchisors reevaluate their brand relationship, the value proposition of it in the both short term and long term, and what other options they might be considering to maintain their hotel's operational capability. So we had some good discussion about that. We also talked about how are vacation rentals and Airbnb reflecting their growth compared to hotels' recovery. We had a bit of a split on this as to maybe the overemphasis of Airbnb's success compared to what hotels are doing. And I was on the other side, which was Airbnb is highlighting the successes that we as hoteliers should be having. Not that we can do everything that Airbnbers are doing and VRBOs are doing for their inventory. I've recently talked about my experience going into a VRBO up north where we literally picked it because of the fact that we wouldn't be running into a lot of people, elevators and halls and so forth not there, isolation, our own kitchen, our capability of having our own space and being able to get out to an area without having to go through a crowd of people or share it with other people was a prerequisite to our first foray out from the house since all this started. This was our first step away, so to speak. We had stayed no place else. We always were around the house. We took little road trips and so forth, but we never stayed overnight anywhere. We would come back that same day. This was our first chance to get away for a few days, and that was our requirement. Well, how can hotels tap into that? There is a 70% plus latent demand to our market. We've already talked about the fact that still, even after a long period of time, 50% of that is still not going to be making regular travel decisions, even though they are interested in it. They don't feel like they're going to be doing something like that. But there is the opportunity to convince people, if you do it well with content and answering questions and truth and honesty and examples and validation, that you can get people to maybe make the decision to come and stay with you. And we're all competing against each other, as terrible as to say, as much as we are competing with the perception of travel and the value of hospitality to the world at this particular point. We also had a really phenomenal point-counterpoint discussion between Dean Schmidt and Stephanie Smith as to about metasearch, the pros and cons. That was because Stephanie released an article, which I don't completely agree with, but she made some very good valid points as to the lack of value for metasearch for brand or any hotels at this particular point, because she was talking about the lack of incremental value to this. And then Dean was very good, being the metasearch expert that he is, on countering what a lot of those points would be. And yes, there is the lack of incrementality to a certain degree, but what you also have to calculate into it is the value of unrealized revenue. What I mean by that is the lack of having to pay commissions for third parties and the ability to make presence of direct channel where you weren't before, and that value proposition of those as well. So it was a great discussion of that as well. So the article that I want to talk about was actually not shared by Robert Cole on his fabulously curated list that you have always the ability to sign up for free. Simply go to bit.ly/rockcheetah, all lowercase, no space. And from there, you can sign up for his newsletter that we use as a baseline for our topics and discussions during the week, including our guest co-hosts that come join us. But this article was from OTAinsights.com on their blog, and that was how to forecast with confidence at your hotel. And what I enjoyed about this was it was a nice rational breakdown of being in the budget season that we are, and forecasting being so critical of what it is that you need to be able to do forecasting. Because right now everybody's just shaking their head going, oh, I can't do it. It's not like it was before. You're right, it's not like it was before. And they made that very clear in the article. We used to forecast on let's say a 30-day basis. We would forecast, we'd keep our forecasts up to date with actuals and so forth, but pretty much we would be rolling over forecasts on a weekly basis on a 30-day forward mentality. That doesn't exist anymore. It's almost a daily forecast and daily impacts and daily variances. And they talked about what you need for current market data, past performance data, future performance data. How can you do these things? And one of the key elements that came out of this, and one of the things I would like to add to what it says, it is no longer just revenue software and revenue data that is so important in this forecasting model. You need marketing insights, you need marketing data, you need lead times, discovery windows. I've talked about it many, many times when I was able to tour with HSMA's Rocket program in 33 cities around North America, was the convergence of revenue management, marketing, and sales to reflect and share the data that each of them share with a common KPI for common goals is really the solution process that is reality now. It's no longer a discussion point. It's not about what, if, and when. If you're not doing it, you are losing market share. If you're not doing it, you will not stay in market. If you're not doing it, you will not succeed. It is a mandatory requirement of our current industry from now going forward that there is a collaboration, cooperation, and symbiotic relationship between those three entities. And it's a critical component. This article did a wonderful job of reemphasizing that as well. So the article is OTAinsights.com. With their blog, which is how to forecast with confidence at your hotel. So that's it. That's our news and show review. Remember, you can find us on Google Play, Apple iTunes, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, Pandora, TuneIn. The list is 38 platforms and counting. You can even find us on Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, and Siri. Just ask to play the Hospitality Marketing Podcast. And no matter which one you may use, if you like the show, please rate us and leave a comment. We'd love to hear your feedback and insights, and of course, any suggestions you have as to what you would like to hear on the show. And plus, it helps others find our content, which hopefully you've enjoyed as well. Also, if this is your first time hearing us, you can subscribe to our show on any of those 38 platforms as well. For an archive of all previous podcasts, you can go to hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/podcasts. That's with an S. And don't forget our live video talk show that you can join and participate in every Friday at 11:30 Eastern U.S. time, called This Week in Hospitality Marketing, the live show. And for that, you simply can go to hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. There you can either register or play back any of the previous 265 shows that we've been doing for now in our 7th year. And we are in 32 countries. We translated in 11 languages, English being one of them, that we play back for. And we also play that in a variety of time zones for the 32 countries as well, so that everybody gets it not at weird hours. And we thoroughly enjoy ourselves with those 25,000 people a week. So, again, thank you for the privilege of your time, and we look forward to talking to you next week.
You have been listening to This Week in Hospitality Marketing, the podcast show 265, brought to you by Hospitality Digital Marketing in support of the HSMAI, the Hospitality Sales and Marketing Association International. All rights reserved. Copyright 2020.